What happens when employees mock the janitor, laughing at his hard work, completely unaware that the CEO is watching every move? This shocking story of arrogance, hidden power, and an unexpected twist will leave you questioning everything about respect and humility. Stick around, because the ending will change how you see the world. Tell us where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that will leave you speechless. The morning sun streamed through the tall glass windows of the office lobby, casting long streaks of light onto the polished marble floor. The space buzzed with the hum of heels clicking, phones chiming, and muted conversations about deadlines and meetings. Sam, the janitor, moved quietly in the background, pushing his mop along the floor in smooth, practiced motions. His uniform hung loosely on his frame, faded and worn, but meticulously clean. A small patch on the breast pocket read Sam in faded embroidery, the only marker of his presence in this bustling corporate hive. Liam leaned casually against the marble counter near the coffee station, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You've got to hand it to Sam," he said loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "He takes cleaning floors to a whole new level. Maybe he thinks he's polishing them for royalty." His words drew a laugh from Sophie, who was standing beside him, her designer handbag perched delicately on her arm. "He should start signing his work," Sophie quipped, sipping her overpriced latte. "It's practically an art form." She tilted her head and gave Sam a sideways glance, her sharp heels clicking as she shifted her weight. Sam didn't react, his expression calm as he focused on a stubborn scuff mark near the elevators. David, standing slightly apart, chuckled hesitantly. He wasn't one to lead in situations like this, but felt the tug of peer pressure. "Careful, Sam," he said, gesturing to the floor. "You might polish it so much we'll start slipping." His voice lacked the bite of Liam's or Sophie's, but the words still hung in the air, joining the growing cloud of ridicule. Sam straightened for a moment, leaning on his mop handle. His eyes were steady and calm, a faint trace of a smile playing on his lips. "Well," he said evenly, his voice carrying just enough to be heard, "a good floor reflects more than just the light. Sometimes it shows who's walking on it." His words were simple, but carried an unmistakable weight, like the steady thud of a hammer driving a nail. For a brief moment, there was silence. Liam blinked, unsure whether he'd been insulted or complimented. Sophie frowned slightly, as though trying to decipher some hidden meaning. David shifted uncomfortably, staring down at his shoes. But the moment passed quickly, and Liam's smirk returned, broader now, as though the exchange had only emboldened him. "Touché, Sam," Liam said, lifting his coffee cup in mock salute. "Guess you've got some poetry in you after all." He turned back to Sophie, who was already scrolling through her phone, her attention drifting elsewhere. In the far corner of the lobby, a figure sat quietly, sipping from a plain white coffee cup. Dressed in a crisp but unassuming shirt and dark jeans, Alex, the CEO, watched the scene unfold with measured interest. Few employees noticed Alex sitting there. Most would have assumed they were just another visitor waiting for an appointment. The only indication of Alex's authority was a subtle air of composure, a quiet but undeniable presence that seemed to blend into the background while commanding it all at once. Alex's eyes lingered on Sam, noting the subtle tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the mop handle a little tighter before resuming their rhythmic motion. They watched as the employees laughed and wandered off, oblivious to the weight of their words. Alex's expression remained unreadable, but their fingers tapped lightly on the edge of the coffee cup, a rhythmic, thoughtful pattern. Sam continued his work as though nothing had happened, but there was a quiet intensity in his movements now, as though each sweep of the mop carried more than just water. He finished the scuff mark and moved toward the far end of the lobby, his steps unhurried and deliberate. Alex followed him with their gaze, their mind turning over thoughts as the laughter of the employees faded into the background noise of the building. The lobby returned to its usual rhythm, but something lingered in the air, a tension, an undercurrent that hinted this wasn't just an ordinary morning. Sam worked silently, the gleam of the floor growing brighter with every pass of his mop. And in the quiet corner, Alex's eyes never left him, their thoughts cloaked in a silence as deliberate as Sam's movements. Later that day, the lobby emptied out as the office workers dispersed to their desks, their coffee cups abandoned on counters and tables. The faint hum of an elevator marked the only sound, blending with the muted scrape of Sam's mop bucket wheels as he pushed it across the pristine floor. The quiet was a relief to Sam, a reprieve from the snickers and offhand remarks that had peppered his morning. He paused briefly by the large windows, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief and gazing out at the city streets below. In the reflection of the glass, Sam caught a glimpse of Alex standing a few feet behind him. Startled but composed, Sam turned and nodded politely. "Didn't see you there," he said, his voice steady but slightly cautious. Alex took a slow step forward, holding their coffee cup loosely in one hand. "Long day?" they asked, their tone conversational but probing, as if testing the waters. Sam shrugged and offered a faint smile. "Just another day. Floors don't clean themselves." Alex tilted their head slightly, studying him. "You've been here a while, haven't you? How long has it been?" 10 years, Sam replied, the pride in his voice subtle but unmistakable. "Started right after my wife passed. Needed a steady job to keep things going for my daughter." Alex's expression shifted, a flicker of something unspoken crossing their face. "That's a long time to be in one place," they said softly. "You must know this building better than anyone." Sam chuckled lightly, leaning on his mop handle. "I know every creak in the floors and every spot where the pipes groan in winter. I've seen employees come and go, promotions handed out, desks moved. It's like a living thing, this place. I keep it running in my own way." There was no boast in his tone, just a quiet certainty that Alex found oddly grounding. They nodded, their gaze lingering on Sam for a moment longer. "Funny," Alex said, almost to themselves, "how the most important people in a system often go unnoticed." Sam's smile deepened, though there was a trace of weariness in it. "It's the job. People only notice the mess when it's not cleaned up." Alex didn't respond immediately, instead letting the silence stretch between them. Finally they said, "You ever think about doing something else?" Sam raised an eyebrow at the unexpected question. "Not sure I follow." Alex hesitated, as though weighing their words carefully. "You seem capable of more than just this." They gestured vaguely at the mop and bucket, their voice thoughtful. "Not that this isn't important. It is. But do you ever want more?" Sam's expression turned unreadable, the faint smile fading into something guarded. "Wanting more isn't always a choice," he said evenly. "Sometimes life decides for you, and sometimes what you've got is enough." Alex didn't press further, sensing the finality in Sam's words. Instead, they nodded, a small smile playing on their lips. "I admire that," they said, their voice sincere. "Most people don't appreciate what they have." Sam gave a slight nod in return, then turned back to his work, the moment passing as quickly as it had come. Alex lingered for a few seconds, watching, as Sam resumed his quiet rhythm, then turned and walked away, their thoughts swirling with the weight of the interaction. As Alex stepped into the elevator and the doors slid shut, their mind replayed Sam's words, the calm resilience behind them. The more Alex thought about it, the more they felt a pang of recognition, a thread of similarity that connected their past struggles to Sam's present. It wasn't the job that defined a person, Alex thought. It was how they carried it. Meanwhile, back in the lobby, Sam moved methodically, his focus fixed on a scuff near the corner of the room. But his hands worked a little slower now, his mind turning over Alex's question. Did he want more? It was a thought he rarely allowed himself, but for a fleeting moment it lingered, heavy and unresolved. The afternoon wore on, and the lobby slowly began to fill again as employees shuffled out for coffee breaks and impromptu meetings. Sam remained a quiet presence in the background, wiping down the counter near the coffee station where stray droplets had pooled. He worked quickly, his focus sharp, but the faint echoes of laughter from earlier still clung to him. Liam and Sophie reappeared deep in conversation as they approached the coffee machine. Their voices were low at first, but as they waited for the machine to whir to life, Liam's tone rose, carrying across the room. "Honestly, I don't get it," he said, shaking his head. "How can someone spend 10 years doing the same thing? Pushing a mop, cleaning floors, taking out trash. It's like, don't you ever think about doing something else?" Sophie smirked as she stirred sugar into her coffee. "Maybe he's just comfortable. Not everyone has ambition, you know." Their words weren't meant for Sam, but they reached him all the same. He straightened slightly, his grip tightening on the cloth he held. He didn't turn to face them, didn't offer a word of acknowledgement, but the way his shoulders tensed betrayed that he'd heard every syllable. David entered the lobby at that moment, his tie slightly askew and his expression drawn with fatigue. He joined the other two at the coffee station, his movements subdued. "Who are we talking about?" he asked absently, pouring himself a cup of lukewarm coffee. "Sam," Liam said with a casual wave of his hand. "I mean, come on. 10 years mopping floors? Don't you think that's a little depressing?" David hesitated, his gaze flicking toward Sam, who was now bent over a table, meticulously wiping its surface. There was a flicker of something in David's eyes, unease, perhaps, but it passed quickly as he glanced back at Liam. "I guess not everyone's after the same things we are," he said quietly, though his voice lacked conviction. Sophie rolled her eyes, tossing her stirrer into the trash. "Please, it's not like there aren't other jobs out there. He's just too lazy to try for anything else." The words hung in the air, sharp and cutting, and this time Sam paused, his hand stilling for just a moment. He inhaled deeply, steadying himself before resuming his work. From across the lobby, Alex reappeared, their sharp eyes immediately catching the subtle shift in Sam's posture. They moved toward the coffee station with unhurried steps, their expression calm but their gaze unyielding. "Good coffee today?" Alex asked lightly as they approached, their presence startling Liam and Sophie. The casual question caught the group off guard, and for a brief moment, an awkward silence fell over them. Yeah," Liam said, recovering quickly. "Same as always, I guess." Alex nodded, taking a sip from their cup and glancing toward Sam, who was now cleaning the far end of the room. "You know," they said, their voice calm but laced with an edge of curiosity, "I've been sitting in this lobby a lot today, watching, listening." Sophie frowned slightly, her confidence wavering. "Listening to what?" she asked, her tone just a little too defensive. Alex smiled faintly, though it didn't reach their eyes. "Just the usual," they said. "Conversations, comments, the things people say when they think no one important is paying attention." The words landed like a stone in a still pond, sending ripples through the group. Liam shifted uncomfortably, his bravado faltering as he exchanged a glance with Sophie. David stared into his coffee cup, his jaw tightening. "I wonder," Alex continued, their voice measured, "if those same people would say those things if they knew who was listening." The silence that followed was heavy, each of them acutely aware of Sam's quiet presence in the distance. Alex's gaze lingered on Liam for a moment longer before they turned and walked away, leaving the three employees standing in uneasy stillness. Sam, oblivious to the interaction, continued his work, but Alex's words hung in the air, wrapping around the group like an invisible thread. Liam muttered something under his breath, his confidence shaken, while Sophie stared at her coffee, her earlier smirk replaced by a faint scowl. David, the quietest of the three, cast one last glance at Sam before walking off, his thoughts clearly elsewhere. From their corner seat, Alex watched it all, their expression unreadable, but their mind sharp, cataloging every reaction, every shift in demeanor. They took another sip of coffee and leaned back, their gaze following Sam as he moved through the lobby. Something was brewing beneath the surface, and Alex intended to see it through. The day rolled on, and the energy in the lobby began to shift as the sun dipped lower in the sky. The once bustling atmosphere of the morning softened into a quieter rhythm. Sam had moved to the glass entrance doors, meticulously wiping away smudges left by hurried hands. The golden light of the setting sun reflected off the glass, casting a warm glow across the floor. Upstairs, Liam, Sophie, and David lingered in the break room, their conversation subdued, but still trailing the same thread that had filled the day. Liam leaned back in his chair, spinning a pen between his fingers, his usual cocky smirk a little less sharp. "What do you think that was about?" he asked, glancing at Sophie. "Alex dropping by like that?" Sophie shrugged, her heels tapping lightly against the floor as she crossed her legs. "Who knows? Maybe they were bored. CEOs don't exactly hang around the lobby for fun, though." David, sitting by the window, looked thoughtful, his hands clasped tightly around a lukewarm coffee cup. "I don't think it was random," he said quietly. "Did you see the way they looked at us? It was like—" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "Like they were testing us, watching how we act when we think no one important is around." Liam snorted, shaking his head. "You're reading too much into it. Alex doesn't care about stuff like that. They probably just wanted coffee." David didn't respond, but the crease in his brow deepened. He glanced out the window, his gaze distant, as though replaying Alex's words in his mind. The silence that followed was uncomfortable, and Sophie broke it with a dismissive laugh. "Honestly, who cares?" she said, standing and adjusting her blazer. "We've got bigger things to worry about than whether the CEO thinks we're nice to the janitor." But even as she spoke, her tone lacked its usual sharpness. There was a flicker of doubt in her eyes, a faint crack in her otherwise confident demeanor. She smoothed her hair and walked out of the room, her heels clicking against the tile floor. Liam followed after her, still twirling his pen, but his swagger seemed forced now, as though he were trying to convince himself of something. David lingered behind, staring into his coffee cup for a long moment, before finally rising and heading back to his desk. His footsteps were heavy, weighed down by a quiet unease he couldn't shake. Down in the lobby, Sam finished cleaning the glass doors and stepped back to admire his work. The reflection of the setting sun shone brilliantly against the spotless surface, and for a moment he allowed himself a small smile. But the moment was interrupted by the sound of hurried footsteps behind him. Turning, Sam saw Alex approaching, their expression calm but intent. They carried a paper cup in one hand and a small notebook in the other. Sam straightened instinctively, his hands dropping to his sides. "Busy evening?" Alex asked, their tone conversational as they stopped a few steps away. "Same as always," Sam replied, his voice steady but cautious. "There's always something to clean." Alex nodded thoughtfully, glancing at the gleaming glass doors. "Looks like you've got everything under control here." Sam gave a slight shrug, his expression neutral. "That's the job." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet hum of the building surrounded them, punctuated only by the faint beeping of an elevator in the distance. Then Alex broke the silence, their voice softer now. "Do you ever wonder," they said, "if people see what you do here, really see it?" Sam hesitated, his brow furrowing slightly. "I'm not sure what you mean." "I mean," Alex continued, gesturing toward the pristine lobby, "if anyone actually notices the work you put into this place, the care, the pride, do you think it matters to them?" Sam met Alex's gaze, his own eyes steady but guarded. "I think people notice when it's not done," he said after a moment. "When the floor's dirty or the trash piles up. But when everything's clean, it's like it's supposed to be that way. Invisible, that's the point." Alex's lips curved into a faint smile, though there was a trace of something sad in it. "Invisible doesn't mean unimportant," they said quietly. "Sometimes the most important things are the ones people don't see." Sam didn't respond, but his hands tightened slightly on the edge of the cleaning cart. There was something in Alex's words that unsettled him, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. He turned back toward the glass doors, his reflection staring back at him, blurred by the golden light of the setting sun. Behind him, Alex watched silently, their mind turning over thoughts they didn't share. They tapped the notebook in their hand lightly against their palm, as though considering something before finally stepping away. Sam heard their footsteps retreating, but didn't turn around. Instead, he stood there for a moment longer, staring at his reflection and wondering why, for the first time in years, he felt seen. As the evening deepened and most employees filtered out of the building, the lobby grew quieter. The once bustling space now echoed faintly with the distant sound of phones ringing in empty offices and the occasional hum of the air conditioning. Sam worked with his usual quiet efficiency, but his thoughts were not as settled as they usually were. Alex's words lingered in his mind, pressing at the edges of his carefully constructed sense of purpose. He pushed his cart toward the trash bins near the coffee station, pausing as he noticed a crumpled napkin wedged under the edge of the counter. As he bent to retrieve it, he overheard voices coming from a nearby conference room. The glass doors were slightly ajar, and though he wasn't one to eavesdrop, the tension in the voices caught his attention. Inside the room, Sophie's voice was sharp, tinged with frustration. "Do you think Alex is testing us? This whole day has been weird. I mean, first, they're sitting in the lobby like some casual observer, and then those cryptic comments. It doesn't add up." Liam's response was dismissive, but there was an edge to his usual confidence. "You're overthinking it. Alex isn't paying attention to us. They've got bigger things to deal with than a couple of employees joking around." David's voice cut through, quieter but firm. "You don't know that, Liam. They were watching us, listening to us. And let's not pretend we didn't give them something to think about. You know exactly what we said about Sam." There was a brief silence, heavy with unspoken tension. Sophie sighed audibly, her heels clicking as she paced the room. "It's not like we were lying. Sam's been here forever, doing the same thing. It's not our fault if we noticed." "It's not about what we noticed," David replied. "It's about how we treated him. Don't you think that matters? Especially if Alex does care?" Sam stood frozen just outside the door, his hand tightening around the handle of his cart. He hadn't meant to hear any of this, but now that he had, the words burrowed deep. He heard the truth in David's tone, the unease in Sophie's, the brittle deflection in Liam's. It was as if he were being dissected from a distance, his life reduced to a set of observations that others thought they had the right to judge. He stepped away quietly, his movements deliberate, and returned to his work. He moved toward the central lobby, where the late evening light had been replaced by the artificial glow of overhead fixtures. His pace was slower now, his thoughts heavier. Across the lobby, Alex emerged from the elevator, their steps measured as always. They carried a slim folder under their arm, their expression unreadable. Sam didn't notice them at first. His attention focused on straightening a row of chairs near the wall. But Alex noticed him. "Still at it, I see," Alex said, their voice cutting softly through the quiet. Sam looked up, startled, but composed. He nodded briefly. "Always something left to do," he said simply. Alex stepped closer, their gaze sharp but not unkind. "Sam," they said, their tone shifting slightly, becoming more direct. "Can I ask you something?" Sam straightened, his hands resting lightly on the handle of his mop. "Of course." Alex hesitated for a moment, as if weighing their words. Then they said, "If you could change one thing about this place, anything, what would it be?" The question caught Sam off guard. He frowned slightly, his brow furrowing as he considered it. "That's not something I've thought much about," he admitted. "I guess I'd want people to understand that every job matters, that no matter what you're doing, it's worth doing right." Alex nodded slowly, their expression thoughtful. "And do you think people here understand that?" Sam hesitated, his gaze dropping for a moment. "Some do, some don't. I've been here long enough to know it's not just this place, it's the way people are. They see what they want to see." Alex's lips pressed into a thin line, and they looked away briefly, their eyes scanning the empty lobby. When they spoke again, their voice was quieter, almost reflective. "Maybe that's something worth changing." Before Sam could respond, Alex's phone buzzed in their pocket, breaking the moment. They glanced at the screen, their expression hardening slightly. "Excuse me," they said, stepping away to answer the call. Sam watched them go, the weight of their question still lingering in his mind. Change. It was such a simple word, but it carried so much weight. He returned to his work, but his thoughts were far from the task at hand. Meanwhile, Alex paced near the elevators, their voice low and clipped as they spoke into the phone. "Yes, I'll handle it," they said firmly, their tone leaving no room for argument. "But I want to see the reports on my desk first thing tomorrow. No exceptions." As they ended the call and slipped the phone back into their pocket, their gaze drifted back to Sam. For a moment, Alex stood there, their expression unreadable, before turning and walking toward the exit. The doors hissed open, and the night swallowed them up, leaving Sam alone in the quiet, spotless lobby. But the quiet wasn't comforting this time. It felt charged, as though the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. The following morning, the lobby was alive with its usual buzz of activity, but there was a palpable undercurrent of unease. Employees moved through the space with quick, purposeful steps, their conversations quieter than usual. Sam was already at work, wiping down the handrails by the stairs, his demeanor as calm and composed as ever. But inside, he felt the weight of the previous day pressing on him, heavy and unrelenting. Near the coffee station, Sophie stood with Liam and David, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She glanced around nervously, her voice low. "Did you see the email this morning?" she asked, her tone sharp. "What email?" Liam asked, his brow furrowing as he poured himself a coffee. "The one from Alex," Sophie hissed. "About the meeting later today. It's mandatory, in the lobby." Liam shrugged, taking a sip of his drink. "So? Alex loves these little pep talks. Probably just wants to boost morale or something." David, standing slightly apart, frowned. "It doesn't feel like that," he said quietly. "Alex isn't the type to call a meeting just for show, especially not in the lobby." Sophie's expression darkened. "You don't think this has something to do with yesterday, do you? With Sam?" David didn't respond immediately, but the look in his eyes said it all. Liam chuckled nervously, brushing off the tension. "Come on, you're being paranoid. Alex isn't going to drag us into some big thing over a janitor." "Maybe not," David said finally, his voice steady but serious. "But Alex was watching us yesterday, listening, and if you think they didn't notice how we treated Sam, you're fooling yourself." Sophie opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. She looked away, her hands tightening around her coffee cup. Liam, sensing the tension, cleared his throat and changed the subject, but the unease lingered between them like a shadow. As the morning wore on, employees began to gather in the lobby, murmuring among themselves as they speculated about the purpose of the meeting. Sam worked quietly on the far side of the room, pushing his mop across the floor in slow, deliberate strokes. He could feel the eyes of the crowd on him, though no one said anything directly. He kept his head down, focusing on his work, but the tension in the air was impossible to ignore. When Alex finally appeared, stepping out of the elevator with their usual air of quiet authority, The room fell silent. They carried a slim tablet in one hand, their expression calm but unreadable. They walked to the center of the lobby, standing in the same spot where Sam had been mopping just moments earlier. "Good morning," Alex said, their voice carrying easily over the murmurs of the crowd. "Thank you all for being here. I won't take up too much of your time, but there's something important we need to address." Sam paused mid-motion, his mop hovering just above the floor. He straightened slightly, his heart pounding as he turned his gaze toward Alex. Around him, the employees shifted uncomfortably, exchanging uncertain glances. Alex let the silence stretch for a moment, their sharp gaze sweeping across the room. "I've spent some time in this lobby over the past few days," they continued, "watching, listening, and observing how we interact with one another. And I have to say it's been enlightening." The crowd was completely silent now, every eye fixed on Alex. Liam shifted nervously, his hands stuffed into his pockets. Sophie stared at the floor, her jaw tight. David, standing near the back of the group, looked uneasy but resolute. "I want to talk about respect," Alex said, their voice calm but firm, "about the way we treat each other, regardless of titles, roles, or positions. Because the truth is, respect isn't just a word we throw around in company values, it's something we demonstrate every day, in the way we speak, in the way we act, and in the way we treat those who make this company run." Their words hung in the air, heavy and unrelenting. Alex's gaze swept across the room again before landing on Sam, who stood frozen beside his cart. "Sam," Alex said, their voice softening slightly, "would you come here for a moment?" The entire room turned to look at him. Sam hesitated, his heart pounding, but he slowly set down his mop and stepped forward. He walked to Alex's side, his steps deliberate, his face carefully composed. "This is Sam," Alex said, gesturing toward him. "For the past 10 years, Sam has been the backbone of this building. He's cleaned up after us, kept our space safe and presentable, and ensured that we can work in comfort. But more than that, he's shown us what it means to take pride in your work, no matter the job." The room was completely silent. Sam stood beside Alex, his hands clasped in front of him, his gaze fixed on the floor. Alex turned to him, their voice gentle. "Sam, I want to apologize to you, not just on my behalf, but on behalf of anyone here who has failed to recognize your value, your dignity, and your contributions." Sam looked up, his eyes meeting Alex's. For a moment he said nothing, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded slightly, his voice low but steady. "Thank you." Alex turned back to the crowd, their expression hardening. "This company cannot succeed without respect for one another, for the work we do, and for the people who make it possible, and if you can't show that respect, then you don't belong here." The words landed like a hammer, echoing through the room. Sophie flinched, her face pale. Liam looked away, his jaw clenched. David stood silently, his eyes fixed on Sam. Alex paused, letting the silence stretch, before finally speaking again. "We're better than this, or at least we should be. Let's start proving it." They stepped back, gesturing for Sam to return to his cart. Sam moved quietly, his head held a little higher than before, as the crowd began to disperse, their conversations muted and tense. But Alex remained standing in the center of the lobby, their sharp gaze following every movement, their mind already working on what came next. The meeting's conclusion left the employees in a stunned silence, their usual chatter replaced by whispers and nervous glances as they filtered out of the lobby. Sam returned to his cart, his movements deliberate but distracted. The weight of Alex's words and the eyes of his colleagues lingered on him like a heavy cloak. He tried to focus on the familiar rhythm of his work, but his mind kept circling back to the moment Alex had addressed him directly, spoken about him, as though he were someone who mattered. On the far side of the lobby, David lingered near the elevators, watching Sam from a distance. Something about the janitor's quiet dignity unsettled him, gnawed at his conscience. He clenched his fists, took a deep breath, and walked toward Sam, his footsteps hesitant but purposeful. "Sam," David began, his voice uncertain. Sam looked up, his brow furrowing slightly. I I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For yesterday. For everything, really." Sam straightened, his expression unreadable. He studied David for a moment before replying. "Why are you apologizing now?" he asked, his tone calm but direct. David hesitated, glancing down at his hands. "Because I was wrong. We were wrong. I joined in when I shouldn't have. And the truth is, I didn't even think about how it might make you feel. I just went along with it." Sam regarded him in silence, the weight of the moment pressing between them. Finally he nodded, though his expression remained guarded. "It's not about what you say now," he said quietly. "It's about what you do next." David nodded, his face flushing slightly. "You're right. I'll do better, I promise." Sam gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod before turning back to his cart. David lingered for a moment, then walked away, his steps slower, his shoulders heavier. From a corner of the lobby, Alex watched the interaction unfold, their sharp gaze catching every nuance. They leaned against a pillar, their arms crossed, and let the scene play out without interfering. When David was gone, Alex approached Sam once more. "Busy day," Alex said, their tone lighter now, almost conversational. Sam looked up, his expression softening slightly when he saw who it was. "You could say that," he replied, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I think I preferred when people didn't notice me." Alex chuckled softly. "Funny how that works, isn't it? Being invisible has its perks until it doesn't." Sam's smile faded, and he glanced toward the glass doors where the last rays of the setting sun cast long shadows across the lobby floor. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice low. Alex tilted their head, considering the question. "That depends," they said finally. "On them, on us, on whether people are willing to learn and change. It's not easy, but it's possible." Sam nodded slowly, his hands tightening slightly on the handle of his cart. "And if they don't?" Alex's expression hardened, their jaw tightening slightly. "Then I make sure they remember today," they said firmly. "Sometimes people need a little reminder of what matters." The determination in their voice struck something in Sam, and for the first time in a long time, he felt the faint stirrings of hope. He glanced around the lobby, at the now empty coffee station, the polished floors, the rows of chairs standing perfectly aligned. It wasn't much, but it was his, and today, for the first time, it felt like someone had truly seen it. "Thank you," Sam said finally, his voice quiet but sincere, "for what you said earlier. It means more than you know." Alex smiled, their gaze steady. "You've earned it, Sam, and I meant every word." They stood there for a moment longer, the silence between them comfortable and unspoken, before Alex turned and walked away, their steps purposeful. Sam watched them go, his heart a little lighter, his grip on the mop a little steadier. But even as the lobby grew quiet again, the echoes of Alex's speech lingered in the air, a reminder that things had shifted. And though Sam didn't know what the future held, he knew one thing for certain. Today, he had been seen. The night settled over the city, the lobby now silent and bathed in the soft glow of its overhead lights. Sam stood near his cart, staring out through the glass doors at the darkened streets beyond. The day had felt impossibly long, stretching in ways he hadn't expected. It wasn't just the words spoken or the apologies whispered, it was the shift, subtle but undeniable, in the way the world within this building had begun to tilt. As he packed up his supplies for the day, a small figure appeared at the entrance. It was Maya, his teenage daughter, clutching her worn sketchbook against her chest. She smiled brightly as Sam opened the door for her, her face lighting up the way it always did when she saw him. "Thought I'd walk home with you tonight," she said, stepping inside. Her gaze swept over the immaculate lobby. "Looks amazing in here, Dad." Sam chuckled softly, ruffling her hair. Thanks, kiddo. You say that every time. Because it's true, Maya insisted, grinning as she followed him back to his cart. Seriously, I don't know how you do it. Sam didn't respond immediately. He leaned on the handle of his cart, his gaze distant as he thought about Alex's words, David's apology, and the looks on everyone's faces earlier. For years, he had moved through this space, silent and unnoticed. But today had been different. Today, something had shifted, not just in how others saw him, but in how he saw himself. You know, he said finally, his voice soft, sometimes it's not about what you do, but about how you do it. About the pride you take in it, no matter what anyone else says. Maya tilted her head, studying him for a moment before nodding. You're right, and you're the best at it. Sam smiled, his heart warming at her words. He pulled his cart toward the storage closet, Maya walking beside him, chatting about her art class and the upcoming competition she wanted him to attend. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and by the time they left the building, Sam felt a little lighter. As they stepped out into the cool night air, Sam noticed someone standing near the curb. It was Alex, leaning casually against their car, their arms crossed as they waited. Sam hesitated, glancing at Maya, who looked up at him curiously. Alex straightened when they saw him, offering a small smile. Heading out? Sam nodded, stepping closer. Yeah, long day. Alex's gaze shifted to Maya, their expression softening. And who's this? Maya smiled shyly. I'm Maya, she said, clutching her sketchbook a little tighter. Alex's smile widened. Nice to meet you, Maya. Your dad's told me a lot about you. Maya glanced up at Sam, surprised. Really? Sam shrugged, a little embarrassed. Might have mentioned you once or twice? Alex chuckled. Well, I can see why. He's got good reason to be proud. Maya beamed at that, and Sam felt a swell of gratitude he couldn't quite put into words. Alex reached into their pocket and pulled out a small envelope, handing it to Sam. What's this? Sam asked, frowning slightly as he opened it. A thank you, Alex said simply. And an invitation. There's a company event next week, something a little more formal. I'd like you to come. Both of you, they added, glancing at Maya. Sam stared at the envelope, his hands slightly unsteady. Inside was a handwritten note expressing appreciation for his years of dedication, along with 2 tickets to the event. He looked up at Alex, his throat tight. You didn't have to do this. Alex's expression softened, their voice quiet but firm. Yes, I did. And this is just the beginning, Sam. You've earned a lot more than you've been given, and I intend to make sure you get it. For a moment, Sam didn't know what to say. He simply nodded, his gratitude evident in the way his shoulders relaxed, the way his breath came just a little easier. Thank you, he said finally, his voice low but steady, for everything. Alex smiled, their gaze steady. You deserve it. As Alex climbed into their car and drove away, Sam and Maya stood on the sidewalk, the envelope still in his hand. Maya looked up at him, her eyes wide with excitement. Dad, this is amazing. Sam smiled down at her, his heart full. Yeah, he said quietly. It really is. They started walking, the city lights twinkling around them, and for the first time in a long time, Sam felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Hope. Hope that things could change, that people could see him, not just the work he did, but the person he was. And as he and Maya disappeared into the night, the world around them seemed just a little brighter. In the end, this story reminds us of a powerful truth. Every role matters, and the smallest actions, whether a kind word or a cruel remark, can have a profound impact. Sam, the janitor, stood as a symbol of resilience and pride in one's work, even in the face of disrespect. The employees who mocked him learned the hard way that respect isn't just a nice idea. It's a fundamental value that shapes how we connect with others. Alex, the CEO, showed us the importance of leadership rooted in empathy and action, proving that true power lies not in position, but in how we treat the people around us. By shining a light on Sam's contributions and holding the employees accountable, Alex inspired a shift in the company culture, one rooted in mutual respect and humanity. This story is more than a corporate lesson. It's a reminder for all of us to look beyond appearances, recognize the value in every person, and treat others with the dignity they deserve. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. Let us know how you've seen kindness and humility make a difference in your own life. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that inspire and make you think.